Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. After my last random review, which was from 2024, let's get back to normal and talk about a film from 1936. It's Dracula's Daughter, directed by Lambert Hillier, who directed quite a lot of films around the period. This is a film that's actually how to do a sequel well and tell a different story. It's a film that surprisingly hasn't been remade as far as I'm aware, but I'm actually really surprised because of the content and the story that it hasn't been remade. It's a sequel to a film you may have heard of called Dracula from 1931, and controversially I think it's actually better than Dracula. Perhaps not better than the Spanish version of Dracula that was filmed on the same sets of the Bela Lugosi film. But this film is one of those sequels that starts directly after the events of the first one. So we're literally in London. We don't see Bela Lugosi in his coffin with a stake through the heart, but we do see somebody dressed in a cloak that looks a little bit like a mannequin, with a stake through his heart, and Renfield lying on the ground dead as well. And we see Von Helsing, who admits to the police that he killed Count Dracula. But there's a couple of things that makes this film really interesting. One is obviously it's Dracula's daughter, so it's a female villain this time, and also the fact it does go through that idea of, if you were found by the police and you've just stabbed somebody through the heart with a stake, how would the authorities kind of deal with that? This is kind of contemporary London with bobbies and things like that. So as the Scotland Yard man in charge says, you're either going to spend your life in prison, or you're going to be executed, or you're going to spend your time in an asylum. But again, Von Helsing is like, well, he was a vampire, so I had to do it. But again, it does bring up what would you actually do if that was reality and you just stabbed somebody saying they were a vampire. So he wants the only man in Britain that would defend him, an ex-pupil played by Otto Kruger, who is up in the Highlands about to shoot some grouse, and his second secretary, Marguerite Churchill, who really has a wonderful performance. She wasn't in that many films, but she has a wonderful performance. There's a very kind of snappy screwball relationship between Otto Kruger and Marguerite Churchill. They obviously have affection for each other, but they also needle each other quite nicely. And he reluctantly, despite all the vampire mumbo jumbo, agrees to defend Von Helsing. But of course, at the same time, the bodies of Renfield and Dracula have been taken to the police station. Unfortunately, there is a comedy copper in the film, which again, sometimes the insertion of like comedy relief in these kind of films does kind of drag it down a little bit. But fortunately, he's only in it for the first 15-20 minutes or so. And this Countess, played by Gloria Holden spectacularly, She appears in just a cloak with her eyes exposed, asking to see Count Dracula's body, which obviously the police officer refuses. And then she asks, do you want money or something more precious than money? And just when you're thinking, hang on a second, she offers a ring, but then hypnotises him with it. And then the bodies go missing. Well, sorry, Dracula's body goes missing. I think they just keep Renfield where it is, because she has a helper as well. So obviously, as far as Van Helsing's case, Scotland Yard are probably going to drop the murder charges because the body seems to have went missing. In those days where you need to actually have a body for a murder charge, you don't actually need a body anymore. But this is where it gets interesting, because it's not just, obviously there's plenty of the Hammer films or vampire films in general, where people find the body of Dracula and resurrect him. But something strange happens with Dracula's body this time. She burns it and destroys it, because on one level she wants to break free of his spell. Obviously the kind of mythos is if you destroy the head vampire, everybody else stops being a vampire. But again, as somebody said in some film somewhere, all the mythos is just from books and films, so it's not actually real, whereas obviously vampires are completely real. So she wants to stop being a creature of the night. She wants to become a normal human being again. Not really sure why. You get immortality, but she has her own use or her own reason for wanting to be human again. So she wants to employ Van Helsing's lawyer / doctor / helper of the police as well, because he talks about hypnosis and maybe being able to help her get away from this addiction, because he treats alcohol addiction or whatever. So he thinks it's maybe just something similar. There's wonderful little details, like she has no mirrors in her house, and the doctor, Otto Kruger, does say it's the first or the only women's apartment I've ever been to where there's no mirrors. And of course she goes to a party and of course has the classic line when she's offered wine. She's like, no, I don't drink wine. And of course when she comes in, the host says, oh, we've got guests that are dying to meet you. It's actually quite a modern little script for 1936. But obviously they're talking about in Scotland Yard, oh yeah, vampires don't exist, but then bodies start being found with little puncture marks on their neck, and of course Van Helsing is quite interested, and slowly Scotland Yard, the guy who's in charge, slowly kind of comes round to the fact maybe there is something going on. He's very much like a Lestrade figure in the film. We see Dracula's daughter, the Countess, getting one of her victims, a young girl who is coming to her Chelsea flat under the guise of doing some modelling for her. But of course she wants to model her neck and shoulders, so she takes off her blouse, and of course she's got a strapped like camisole on, and the young lady says, oh, do you want me to take these straps down as well? I mean, it's pretty saucy stuff. And of course Gloria Holden's eyes are quite spectacular when she's looking at the girl, because the girl also does say, why are you looking at me that way? And then that girl ends up being found with little holes in her neck. Obviously there's kind of lesbian undertones or overtones or everywhere tones. So it's this fight between I have to feed, but I also want to stop being under this curse, and the need for help, but also quite enjoying the power of able to hypnotise people and control people, and obviously her lackey, very much like Renfield and all the kind of lackeys of vampires, they're always under the idea that they'll get turned. So when the Countess is talking about, she wants to be cured and she wants to go back to being normal, this doesn't really please the lackey very much. So from London, the finale ends up back in Transylvania in the Carpathians, and of course it freaks out the locals when they see lights back on in the castle, because they assume Dracula's returned. And again, you still get the "I'll take you only as far as here, I'm not going to take you any further," until 5 crispy pounds are shown, and then he says, "Well, I'll take you a wee bit further, but not any further," until the wonderful climax as Otto Kruger's secretary is taken to the castle, and he's offered, well, you can stay here forever with the Countess, so she seems to have forgotten about being cured, or your secretary's going to die. What on earth's going to happen? Who can possibly tell? It is just quite wonderful. It's 71 minutes. It flies by, but it never feels rushed. Great performances. Again, Gloria Holden is pretty iconic looking. As I said, I'm surprised that hasn't been remade. And again, it's a perfect example of how to do a sequel, but not just copying and pasting the original. This is a Universal Classics DVD. There is a Blu-ray available, which is a bit more expensive than the DVD. And as I'm being sensible these days, I just bought the DVD. But no doubt if a boutique label releases a special edition, obviously I'll buy it on Blu-ray. But beautifully shot, really atmospheric. The print on the DVD is actually really good. It is a PG, for some scenes maybe unsuitable for young children. But it is absolutely wonderful. Of course it brings questions of Dracula's daughter. Did he have a daughter before he turned? But then was he not born a vampire? Or you get lost in the mythos. Who's the mother? Where's she in all of this? But again, I'm surprised that hasn't been remade. But thankfully it hasn't, because this one is rather wonderful on its own. Made all the way back in 1936. And as I said, you could controversially say it's actually better than the 1931 Bela Lugosi. I know that's controversial. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know if you've seen Dracula's Daughter, or if you've seen Dracula's Wife anywhere. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell